You care about it. That's the frustrating part. It matters to you. It affects your future. You've been thinking about it for days, maybe even weeks. You sit down with the intention to finally begin. You open your laptop. You look at the task, and nothing happens. Instead, you check your phone. You suddenly feel hungry. You decide your desk needs cleaning. You open another tab. You tell yourself you'll start in 5 minutes. 5 minutes turns into 40. 40 turns into guilt. Guilt turns into pressure. And the pressure makes starting feel even heavier. Now you're not just behind. You're disappointed in yourself. And the question keeps repeating in your head. If this is important to me, why can't I just start? Most people answer that question incorrectly. They say it's laziness. They say it's lack of discipline. They say you just need to try harder. But the real reason you can't start has almost nothing to do with laziness and almost everything to do with emotion. Procrastination is not a productivity problem. It's an emotion regulation strategy. You're not avoiding the task. You're avoiding the feeling the task creates. Think about the last time you avoided something meaningful. It wasn't confusion. You knew what to do. It wasn't lack of clarity. The first step was obvious. But when you thought about beginning, something inside you tightened. Maybe it was subtle. A slight anxiety in your chest, a sense of overwhelm, a whisper of doubt, a quiet thought that said, "What if this doesn't go well?" That discomfort is the key, because your brain is designed to reduce discomfort immediately. The moment you switch to something easier, that discomfort drops. You feel relief, and that relief trains your brain. It teaches your nervous system that avoidance equals safety. Here's what's happening neurologically. When you look at a task that matters, your brain doesn't just evaluate it logically. It evaluates it emotionally. It scans for risk. It asks whether this action could lead to failure, rejection, embarrassment, loss of status, or proof that you're not as capable as you hope. If the task is meaningful, the perceived stakes are higher. And the higher the stakes, the stronger the emotional charge. Your brain interprets high stakes as potential threat. Not physical danger, but social and psychological threat. And your nervous system reacts accordingly. It activates subtle stress. Not panic, not terror. Just enough discomfort to make you hesitate. That hesitation is not weakness, it's protection. Before you start, the idea exists safely in your head. It's perfect there, untouched by reality. Once you begin, you expose it to the world. You expose yourself to feedback, to judgment, to imperfection. Starting transforms imagination into evidence, and evidence can challenge your identity. So your brain delays exposure. It nudges you toward preparation instead of execution. Research feels productive. Planning feels responsible. Organizing feels useful. But preparation is safe. Execution is vulnerable. This is why you can be extremely productive in secondary tasks, while avoiding the one thing that truly matters. You answer emails. You organize files. You improve small details. But the core action remains untouched, because the core action carries emotional weight. Over time, this pattern creates something even more damaging than delay. It creates self-doubt. Each time you avoid starting, you send yourself a subtle message that maybe you're not capable. Maybe you lack discipline. Maybe you're not the type of person who follows through. That belief increases the emotional intensity next time. Now the task doesn't just risk failure. It risks confirming your fear about yourself. The longer you wait, the heavier it feels. Not because the task changed, but because the story around it grew. The mind adds layers. This is important. This will define something about me. I can't mess this up. That internal narrative transforms a simple action into a high-stakes event. And high-stakes events trigger avoidance. There's usually one underlying emotion driving this pattern. It's vulnerability. Starting something meaningful exposes you to the possibility of not being enough. If you don't start, your potential remains intact. If you start and struggle, reality becomes visible. And reality can bruise the ego. So your brain keeps you in a loop that feels safer in the short term, but more painful in the long term. Let's break that loop clearly. The cycle looks like this. Important task appears. Discomfort rises. You escape into distraction. Discomfort drops. Relief reinforces avoidance. Guilt appears. Pressure builds. Next attempt feels even heavier. Each repetition strengthens the neural pathway of avoidance. But pathways can be rewired. The first step is awareness. The next time you can't start, pause and ask a different question. Instead of asking what's wrong with me, ask what feeling am I trying not to feel right now. Be specific. Is it fear of failure? Fear of judgment? Fear of wasting time? Fear that you'll discover you're not as capable as you hoped? When you name the emotion, you bring it into conscious awareness. And conscious emotions are easier to regulate than unconscious ones. The second step is reducing perceived threat. Your brain reacts to scale. If the task feels massive, your nervous system interprets it as high risk. Shrink the task dramatically. Not work on the presentation. Just open the file. Not write the report. Just write one imperfect sentence. The goal is not productivity at first. The goal is disarming the threat response. When the first step is small enough, your brain doesn't trigger the same level of resistance. The third step is learning to sit with discomfort briefly without escaping. When you feel the urge to check your phone, don't immediately obey it. Stay with the discomfort for 90 seconds. Breathe slowly. Keep your attention on the task without forcing action. Most emotional spikes rise and fall quickly if you don't reinforce them with avoidance. But if you escape instantly every time, you teach your brain that discomfort is intolerable. Staying, even briefly, rewires that belief. Another crucial shift is separating identity from outcome. If every important action feels like a test of your worth, you will always hesitate. Instead of framing the task as proof of your value, frame it as data collection. If it works, you gain information. If it fails, you gain information. Data does not threaten identity. It informs improvement. When you lower identity stakes, the nervous system calms down. You also have to let go of the myth of readiness. Many people believe they will start when they feel ready. But readiness is usually just the absence of fear, and fear rarely disappears on its own. Action generates clarity. Action builds confidence. Confidence is not a prerequisite for starting. It is a byproduct of repeated exposure and survival. You don't start because you feel confident. You feel confident because you started before and survived the discomfort. There's another uncomfortable truth. Some people become dependent on last-minute pressure. When you delay until the deadline is close, adrenaline spikes. That adrenaline cuts through emotional resistance. It forces action, and you get the task done. So your brain learns that stress equals productivity. But this trains your nervous system to only act under threat. Without urgency, you stall. Breaking that cycle means learning to act before panic appears. Calm action feels unnatural at first because you're used to crisis-driven momentum. But calm action is sustainable. Crisis-driven action is not. Imagine approaching your next meaningful task differently. You sit down and notice resistance. Instead of labeling yourself lazy, you identify the emotion. You acknowledge the vulnerability. You shrink the task to the smallest possible step. You sit with discomfort for 90 seconds without escaping. Then you begin with something imperfect and small, not to prove anything, just to move. That small movement generates momentum, and momentum weakens fear. Over time, starting becomes less about emotion and more about pattern. The discomfort doesn't disappear completely, but it no longer dictates your behavior. You feel it and act anyway. That is real self-control, not suppression, not aggression. Calm action in the presence of resistance. The real reason you can't start, that your brain is trying to protect you from psychological pain. It has learned that avoiding meaningful action temporarily reduces discomfort. But short-term relief creates long-term frustration. Growth requires exposure to manageable levels of vulnerability, not reckless exposure, not overwhelming pressure. Small, repeated, survivable steps. Each time you act despite discomfort, you send your nervous system a new message. This is safe enough. I can handle this. And gradually, the emotional charge decreases. The loop changes. Important task appears. Discomfort rises. You acknowledge it. You act in small steps. Progress appears. Confidence grows. That new loop strengthens with repetition. If this resonates deeply, understand something important. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not uniquely flawed. You are operating within a predictable emotional protection system. And once you see the system clearly, you can work with it instead of fighting yourself. Starting is not about waiting until fear disappears. It's about recognizing fear and moving anyway in small, controlled ways. The more you practice this, the less mysterious procrastination becomes. It transforms from a personality trait into a pattern you can adjust. The next time you find yourself staring at something that matters and feeling stuck, don't attack yourself. Pause. Ask what emotion is present. Reduce the size of the first step. Stay with discomfort for a moment. Then begin imperfectly. Not because you feel ready, but because action is how readiness is built. You don't need a new personality. You don't need extreme motivation. You need emotional tolerance. And emotional tolerance grows through repetition. The more often you start despite resistance, the quieter that resistance becomes. This is the shift. Starting is not a productivity skill. It is the ability to tolerate vulnerability long enough to act. And once you understand that, everything changes.